Hello and welcome to your ALH3 Chapter 14 Eye and Ear Medications lecture. Our objectives for this chapter are to define all key terms, list 5 parts of the eye and the function of each structure, recall 3 conditions related to the eye requiring treatment with medications and an example of an appropriate medication, classify parts of the ear as belonging to the external ear, middle ear, or inner ear, and discuss the function of each part. Also, recall 3 conditions related to the ear that require treatment with medication and an example of an appropriate medication. Let's start with the eye. So, the eyes are protected by the orbits of the skull, and the eyelids, eyelashes, and eyebrows protect the eyes from irritants and infectious microbes. The hard sclera protects the outer eye and provides a network of blood vessels to nourish the eye with oxygen and with nutrients. The iris regulates the amount of light that enters the eye by dilating and constricting the pupil, and the outer eye is bathed with tears. The anterior chamber contains the watery aqueous humor, and the cornea is the clear structure that covers the iris, pupil, and the anterior chamber. The cornea is provided with oxygen and nutrients through tears, not blood vessels. And here we see all the different parts that are labeled. So go ahead and take a second to look at all the parts labeled here. So the posterior chambers contains the viscous vitreous humor, and images are projected through the pupil and lenses onto the rods, and these detect black and white and cones that detect color, and this is in the retina. These inverted images are then sent to the brain via the optic nerve for interpretation. So we also look at we talked about the vitreous humor, the retina, the optic nerve, and then a tonometer is used to measure pressure in the eye, and increased interocular pressure, also known as IOP, can lead to blindness. Let's look at our first comprehension check here. The part of the eye that controls light entering the eye is the... Good. If you selected C, the iris, you are correct. So ophthalmologists or optometrists annually evaluate the eyes using instruments such as the tonometer that we talked about in the previous slide, and these measure the pressure in the eyes. The tonometer measures the pressure in the eye. If the interocular pressure, the IOP, increases, it is usually because the aqueous humor is not flowing out of the eye correctly, and this is placing pressure on the optic nerve, and this can eventually lead to blindness. Glaucoma is the leading cause of blindness, and it's typically involving an increase in the IOP that causes the optic nerve damage. The most common type of glaucoma is primarily open angle glaucoma, and it is effectively treated with ophthalmic drops. And angle closure glaucoma is a rare type in which the eye pressure rises very rapidly. Symptoms include headaches, eye pain, nausea, multicolored halos around lights at night, and blurred vision. And this type of glaucoma is corrected surgically. In some cases of glaucoma, damage to the optic nerve may occur even though the interocular pressure is within normal parameters. And other glaucoma types include a congenital form and that which is secondary to other diseases like injuries or medications, and these types are treated through medications or surgery as needed to lower the interocular pressure as much as possible. So on the next slide, we see the angle closure glaucoma. And this is acute or narrow angle glaucoma. And we talked about that this is more rare and that the pressure rises rapidly. And there's the symptoms that we talked about on the last page: the headaches, eye pain, nausea, multicolored halos and lights, blurred vision, and it does require surgical correction. And then here again, we talked about normal tension glaucoma. Other glaucoma types include congenital forms, and this is in which the is secondary to other diseases such as the injury or medications that we talked about. These types are treated through medications or surgery as needed to lower the interocular pressure, as we said before. And secondary glaucoma is caused by medications is usually temporary and subsides with discontinuation of that medication. So here's comprehension check number 2. The type of glaucoma in which pressure rises rapidly and requires surgical correction is? That is correct. It is B. So medications for glaucoma. Medications used to treat glaucoma act by increasing the flow of the aqueous humor and include miotics and prostaglandins. Other medications such as alpha and beta blockers, carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, and osmotic diuretics decrease the interocular pressure by reducing the flow of the aqueous humor and by reducing the amount of aqueous humor. So again, miotics increase the outflow of the aqueous humor. Miotics also constrict the pupil. Some are cholinergic agonists, which decrease the interocular pressure. Some examples might be the pilocarpine HCl, so the prostaglandins increase outflow of the aqueous humor by dilating the blood vessels, and some side effects that we see is the change in pigmentation of the iris, so the color of the eye. And an example of this would be the lantanoprost or Xylantin listed here. Other medications such as the alpha beta blockers, the carbonic anhydrase inhibitors, and osmotic diuretics decrease the interocular pressure by reducing the flow of the aqueous humor by reducing the amount of aqueous humor. So alpha blockers decrease the production and increase drainage of the aqueous humor. They also have a mild effect on the cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Apriclonidine HCl is an example of this. Beta blockers decrease the production of the intraocular fluid. Low doses have no systemic effect, and betoxolol HCl would be an example of this. Carbonic anhydrase inhibitors decrease production of intraocular fluid. They are topical or systemic in use. Acetazolamide is an example of this. And osmotic diuretics are used for eye surgery to decrease the amount of aqueous humor rapidly, and glycerin would be an example of this. Also, local anesthetics, antimicrobials, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs, and the glucocorticoids are used for minor eye injury and irritation. They can be administered by drops or injections. For milder irritations and injuries, the medications simply soothe the outer eye. And for more serious irritation and injuries, the medications need to actually penetrate beyond the surface. So ophthalmic glucocorticoids should not be used long term because of the suppression of the immune system. And again, talking about the minor eye injuries, example of a local anesthetic might be the tetracaine. An example of an antimicrobial might be gentamicin. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the NSAIDs, we look at for the eyes. One of the examples is the Acular. An example of the glucocorticoids would be dexamethasone. Comprehension check number 3. Acular is an example of which of the following ophthalmic medications? If you selected D, an NSAID, you are correct. Great job. Now we're looking at medications to facilitate eye exams. So cycloplegic mydriatics relax the ciliary muscles and dilate the pupils so that the examiner can evaluate the inner eye. Local ophthalmic anesthetic agents that impair the blink reflex are used when removing foreign bodies, and straining agents are non-toxic, water-soluble dyes used to diagnose the corneal epithelial defects caused by infection or injury. They can assist in finding the foreign body or a contact lens by coloring the object green. Immunomodulators, Restasis is an example, and this increases tear production, and it may take up to 6 months to see the maximum benefit of this. Now we're going to move on to the ear. The ear is the part of the human body that detects sound from the environment and delivers it to the brain. It also plays a major role in maintaining our proper balance and position of the body. So the outer ear consists of the pinna, and this protects the middle and inner ear as well as collects sound and funnels it through the external auditory canal. The canal contains glands that secrete cerumen, which is earwax, to protect the inner ear from damage and infection. You can see a larger image of the ear in your book on page 272, but we're just going to go over some of the parts. Here's the pinna, the external auditory canal, the malleus and the incus, as well as the stapes, if you can see right in there. And then down here, I'm going to show you where the eustachian tube runs, as well as the cochlea up in here. And again, take a look on page 272 of your book if you want to really see a better detailed anatomy image of the ear. So moving on from the outer ear or the pinna, we're going to go to the middle ear. And the middle ear is separated from the outer ear by the tympanic membrane, also known as the eardrum. And it includes the auditory ossicles, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and the middle ear cavity and the eustachian tube. The sound waves hit the tympanic membrane, and the 3 flexible bones called the ossicles convert the sound into mechanical vibrations. The eustachian tube connects the ear and the throat and functions to equalize pressure on both sides of the tympanic membrane. Moving now to the inner ear. The inner ear consists of fluid-filled tubes containing the actual hearing cells of the body. It also contains the semicircular cells and the